What is good, everybody? Juliana Page here, and I'm going to talk to you today really about the way to get to a transformed life, right? I'm going to talk about my transformed life. Let me put it that way. But I sense that I know it to be true that if you've been through darkness, if you've come through darkness, if you've been through any kind of trauma, like living through a pandemic, then you know intimately the craving, the hunger, the desire for more. Like you know that there's more for you and you crave a transformed life. And sometimes that can elude you. Sometimes you might have tried all the things that are out there to do, and you still don't feel like your life has changed. You don't feel like you have changed. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to give you some word because I believe that that's so powerful. So recovery in any form is a big deal, whether it's emotional, relational, financial, whether it's a physical healing. But I think spiritual recovery, honestly, is where it's at. And this return to God, this return to love, this return to understanding intimately who it is that you are, right? And who God is in you. So spiritual practice is really unlearning fear and chaos that you've been groomed in and remembering love. Okay. But it's not something that happens just instantaneously. Yes, there's miraculous moments like that, but it usually is simple, consistent, daily practices that really add up to a lot of little right actions every day. And it changes your life. So God can deliver you in a moment. But what I found is he often takes you on a spiritual maturity process. He develops your character. He helps you mature. He develops you. He transforms you, right? So it's foreshadowing. So I want to highlight some things. So I actually did a post on Instagram not too long ago, and I got some feedback on it because I was getting a lot of compliments that I have really great energy and my vibe is awesome and all this beautiful stuff. And that's God. Okay. So I'm not even going to take credit for it. That's God. However, I do want to emphasize some points that were made in that post that I think are so valuable because it really gave me an opportunity to reflect and kind of put some things together. Okay. So first thought is this: if you put anything, I don't care what it is, work, kids, husband, wife, friends, parents, siblings, whatever. If you put anything before your spiritual practice / your relationship with God, in other words, right, you'll lose it. Okay. I don't know if many of you know that to be true, but if you prioritize work, if you prioritize these other things over relationship with God, you don't have one. It's like working out. If you don't develop your strength and your muscles, you don't have them. Right? So that's first and foremost what I want to say. But I think what was great about this was I shared a ton of photos. I don't know if you can see all of them, but I kind of shared about this spiritual recovery process because I think some people think you find your thing and you stay with it. You find your practice and then your life just changes. And that's not always how it works. Some degree it did, which I'll get there, but there was a lot of things that I sought connection with God through. Okay. But what I want to highlight is not all of those things brought me the peace that surpassed all understanding, brought me the transformation that I was craving, right? Not all of those things brought me this shift, this complete shift in my identity. Okay. So I want to highlight that. So some of the things I shared about nature, even to this day, just getting out in nature, in stillness, being able to breathe out in the middle of a hike, right? Just being connected to nature often connects me to God pretty instantly. Reggae music is one of the things that I shared because I'm not sure if you know this, but ska music, reggae music, it was developed off to mimic the beat of the heart. So if you listen to the beats, that's what it's mimicking is the heartbeat, which is really neat. But what I love about that is there's so much, especially in a third world country, right? There's so much depth and pain, right? That is communicated through these songs, but it's also so lighthearted and uplifted. So it brings you this joy in the midst of pain, which is sometimes life, right? Oftentimes life. So reggae music, I shared about yoga. This is actually interesting. So I learned through YouTube, thank God, how to tie these turbans on my head. For what it's worth, a lot of people don't know that about my story. But I went through a yoga teacher training, not knowing what the outcome was going to be. But in hindsight, I learned, this is before my relationship with God. In hindsight, I learned that God was slowing me down. He was teaching me to sit for long periods of time so that eventually I'd have no excuses when it came to sit and study the word and be still before him. But that season, I was learning all sorts of things. I was learning how hardwired I was for just pushing and going and living for the wrong reasons, really. How disconnected I was from my own soul. Just so many beautiful lessons came from just that. So I shared my yoga community. I shared a lot of beautiful mentors that have shared their teachings along the way that showed up as very lovely and loving human beings. Because when you don't come from, that sort of intimacy, that closeness, that connection, love and nurturing, right? You seek it, you crave it, and hopefully you go after it. Otherwise, you could self-destruct, right? So I shared about fire walking for the first time. I shared other mentors that were on here, Wayne Dyer. I shared about a 12-step Christ Center recovery program. So many beautiful things. And what was interesting about this is that I'm really highlighting that spiritual recovery is about unlearning fear and judgment and unforgiveness and chaos and remembering love, like I mentioned. And because I didn't come from a legacy of faith and have present parents that taught me who I am and really celebrate my uniqueness, I was starved, okay, for this more that I knew was out there for my life and to be worthy of it. Okay, I thought that I had to earn it or deserve it somehow, which was backwards. And I was also taught that outward success equals love, meaning if you can just achieve enough, if you can just perfect yourself enough, if you can just whatever enough, then you'll be worthy, right? And it nearly destroyed me. So for a long time, I needed a miracle. I needed help, but I wouldn't surrender. So in college, if you've been following me for any period of time, that manifested as eating disorders, right? And that was really unhealthy. But what I was learning through these teachers, right, was that my job is to share God, to align with God and to share joy. And it's that joy that can heal the world. But it took me years and many windy roads. And I'm just talking spiritually, okay? Many servant-hearted people to help me lower these walls of distrust that I had built, to help me eradicate doubt and fear from my life, and to really stop the search ultimately and seek the source, which is God, okay? And after that, finally, when I stopped the search, I was able to get over myself and get busy about his business, okay? If I'm constantly in this self-focus, or if I'm constantly seeking things for my own development, I'm not connected to God. I'm just looking for what's in it for me. So a couple of things that I highlighted here is whatever you do, don't take life for granted. God can meet you where you are, and he can even take, whether you're walking with him or not, he can even take what you're going through and point you to him, which is really interesting. So keep that in mind. Also, whatever you do, wake up. Wake up by any means necessary. Don't shut down. Keep waking up. Keep becoming more conscious, more aware of who you are and what you've been put on this earth to do and where your power comes from. Take responsibility for the privileges, the gifts, the opportunities you have. Dwell in the light of God and the joy of who you're here to be. That's really what can pave the way for transformation. So a lot of times the spiritual recovery, it's again, lots of little actions, okay? So in my journey, all of those experiences were great. But what I want to highlight is I can't tell you how many self-help books that I've read, how many conferences I went to, how many experiences that I planted myself into. It took a heck of a lot of courage and bravery, especially for somebody who used to identify as just being shy and introverted. So keep that in mind. Like, it was really, really challenging, right? But I kept taking these actions, but I could have kept seeking self-help. I could have kept seeking mentors. I kept paying for different resources to develop myself, to make myself okay, to get this transformation that was promised. But ultimately, it was not for me personally until I stopped that search from on the outside, that search for more, that search for knowledge, that search for more teaching, that search to be better somehow, right? Until I stopped that and seeked the source, right? Sought after the source, right? God, Jesus in this case, okay? I let all of that other stuff go. I got deliverance from all that other stuff. I shut doors to all that other stuff, and I sought the main thing. I said, okay, at this point, I've tried all that stuff, right? And it's not giving me the peace that surpasses all understanding. It's not giving me this confidence. It's not giving me the security. It's giving me really good habits that are probably healthy for me, right? Greater flexibility, greater capacity to just breathe and slow down and journal and reflect, like great stuff, right? But I wanted transformation, okay? So I needed to go to the one that could do that. So what is transformation and what does it mean? Transformation is being changed entirely from the inside out, okay? And that's not something that we can do in our own strength. Otherwise, we would have done it, right? The Apostle Paul talks about how there's these things that he knows to do, but he doesn't do them. And there's these things that he knows that he shouldn't do, but he keeps doing those things. And that's a perfect example of what it's like to be a human, right? There's a lot of things that we know to do that we just don't do. So how do I know that it's only God? Check this out. So he talks about in Philippians. Okay. Finding it. Philippians 2:12-13. Okay. He's talking. It's giving me a redirect notice. Oh, the interwebs. Okay. Philippians 2:12-13 says this. Maybe. This is what I'm dealing with, okay? What? I have all the interwebs. What is happening here? Okay, this one came up. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and with trembling. For it is God who works in you, both to will, to give you the desire, to work for his good pleasure, for what pleases him. So it is God who works in you to give you the will, to give you the desire, okay, to do what pleases him. And he will guide and establish your steps. We can't do that apart from God, okay? We might think that we're living lives that please him, but how do we know that if we don't know him or what pleases him? Okay? So that one is huge. But this is also telling you that we work out our own salvation. So in my experience, I had deliverance, instant deliverance from something that I couldn't get deliverance from those eating disorder habits from college. I had instant deliverance from that when I surrendered my life to Christ, literally, right? But there was a process. God planted me in a 12-step Christ-centered recovery program to work out what I needed to go through to unlearn habits, to unlearn patterns, okay? To unlearn and let go of and release and forgive and remove blocks and barriers that would prevent me from living a life that's aligned with him, in tune with him, in sync with him, right? Because if I don't mature, if I don't grow beyond that stuff, right, there could be a temptation, there could be a trigger, and I'm right back, okay? So deliverance is I remove that from your experience. I take that desire from you and I give you the desire to do what pleases me. However, you've got to walk it out. Okay? You've got to work out your own salvation. That is so, so powerful. All right. Job 22:29 says this, when men are cast down, then thou shalt say, dun, 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 suspense, right? When men are cast down or when people are brought low, you shall lift them up. God will save them. Okay? So basically, if you humble yourself before the Lord, he will lift you up. and I know this to be true from my own experience. It just took me years to do it. It was actually a breakup that completely shattered my heart. That brought me to a place where I could surrender my life to God. And really what was happening for me was I kept hearing these messages on grace. This same person that I allowed to break my heart, right, had invited me to church. And that's not new. But for the first time, I was hearing messages on grace that were getting planted in my spirit. And it was messages that were blowing my mind, because at this point in my life, I had learned to function in pain, in chaos, and dysfunction in a really abnormal way. Like, it's almost like high functioning addicts in a sense, where they're so high functioning, they're so good at showing up in the world professionally, relationally, all the things, right? That you have no clue that they're actually struggling with a major addiction behind the scenes, right? Because they just show this outward like appearance of having it all together. So I had learned something similar. I learned how to have a limp and limp through life, right? Like that was normal. Like everybody shows up like that, right? But then I kept hearing this message, like, who the sun sets free is free indeed. And I'm like, tell me about that freedom, because I don't want to just survive anymore. I don't want to invite the wrong people into my life that could potentially destroy me, and it's going to take me years to recover from. I don't want to get off the path. I don't want to waste my precious time and energy anymore. I don't want to keep feeling like I'm achieving all of this, but ultimately coming up short because it's not fulfilling me, right? It's just like you achieve this thing, you're already on to the next. So like, what is it even about? Like, I can't live like that. I was tired of like these cycles, right? Different people, different experiences, but still that same gap, a God gap, right? That only God can fill. So kept hearing these messages about grace, about this unmerited, unearned favor of God, about how God is pursuing me, how he's chasing me down, right? For example, even when I'm doing things that are out of alignment with what pleases him, right? God is not about astrology, about yoga, about horoscopes, about all these crazy metaphysical practices. Like, God wasn't in those things, right? But he was still meeting me there, and he was still guiding me, and he was still drawing me in, even when it didn't look like it at all, right? I might have been a prodigal in this case, but he was still drawing me, okay? I might have been living with an orphan spirit, but he was still getting ready to adopt me, okay? God had never turned away from me, even when I was not even in relationship. How powerful is that? Grace, okay? Didn't deserve that. Grace. So I was hearing messages like, God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Okay. As somebody that didn't feel like she was abounding, I wanted to abound, right? Or, he saved us and called us to a holy life, not because anything that we've done, but because of his own purpose and his grace. Okay. So there's nothing that I could do to earn God's love or to deserve God's love, which was counterintuitive to how I've been wired. I learned that if I'm outwardly successful, then I'm worthy of love. Or if I just earn it somehow or prove that I'm worth it, then I can get love in my life, right? It was just very backwards, and that only attracted the wrong career positions, the wrong people, and a lot to sift through, right? That didn't have to be the case for me. Those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. Hello. I wanted to renew my strength. Okay. Out of his fullness, we've received all grace. Okay. God demonstrates his own love that while we were sinners, right? While we're out there doing all of these sinful things, right? Which is just living in disobedience to God. He died for us. Like, what? Right? Or grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives. I had no clue how to do that. Thank God for Philippians 2:12, right? Then 3 times I pleaded with the Lord, take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Okay, so you get the idea. But I was hearing all of these messages on grace, and my mind was blown. Okay. And it was starting to really impact me. I wanted to be free. I wanted a new life. I wanted to be able to let go of my past. I wanted to be able to have a totally new life. I didn't want to repeat patterns. I wanted all of these generational curses to stop with me. I wanted to lay a new foundation, even if I wasn't shown it, but I had no clue how to do it. And that felt so overwhelming, particularly not even knowing God. I didn't have a Bible, wasn't reading the word. I had no clue if I could hear God for myself. I didn't know how to pray. I'm like, do you write it out? Do you say it out loud? Like, how do you do this thing, right? No idea, okay? But I was hungry for transformation. I wanted a transformed life, and I dared to believe. Okay, so some of the things that paved the way, and for perspective, we all have faith. It just really depends on what we decide we want to put it into, right? Where are you going to put your faith? Why not put it in God? After all the years of not doing it, I don't know how I never put it there, right? It would have saved me a lot if I just put it there first. But daring to believe paves the way for God to really do some miraculous things in your life. And sometimes a miracle is just a change in perspective, honestly. But God does that. He transforms you entirely from the inside out. We are transformed by the renewing of our mind, by reading the word and letting that word work in and through us, right? So powerful. So hope is a positive expectation. So I believe that you have to have hope. So even though I was seeking these different spiritual experiences because I inherently knew that my problem was a spiritual one, anything I was facing in my life, it was a spiritual problem. I just didn't know how to get spiritual tools to help me resolve it in the spiritual so that I could have a different experience in the natural. I didn't know how to do that. So I had hope that I would get, if I just kept seeking, I would get the answer, which I did. So God worked with that positive expectation. It took a lot of windy roads and interesting experiences, right? But God brought me to himself. Faith is deeper than hope, okay? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So I was committed to finding it no matter what, all right? Not knowing that it was Jesus, but I was committed to finding it, okay? Positive attitude, dude. If you just have a positive attitude, particularly in moments where you shouldn't, life has a different way of working out for you. It's a kingdom principle, to be real. You'll reap what you sow, right? And don't complain. If you made some of these little actions daily, it would help you get into a position, right? Where you're more present, where you're more available, okay? Now, here's something to keep in mind. God never changes. He's good, right? And he's sovereign. He doesn't need to change, right? He's perfect, but he always changes things in people. So keep that in mind. God is working in your life, even when you don't see it, and even when you don't feel like he's working. All right. Ephesians 3:20. You know this one, right? You probably do. Dun, dun, dun. I have a couple, so let me pull up these verses here. So Ephesians 3:20, I have a sense that you've heard it before. Dun, dun, dun. Where am I at right now? Ephesians 3:20. Okay. Now unto him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we dare ask, think, or imagine, according to the power that works in us. So God is able to do more than we dare ask, think, or imagine, according to the power of Holy Spirit working in and through us. Okay. So powerful, powerful, powerful. So the question that I would have for you is, are you willing to be daring with your believing? Are you willing to dare believe that there's nothing in your life that God can't change? He can change anything. Nothing is impossible with God, right? And he has a good plan for you. He promises to give you a future and a hope. So if you don't feel like you're living out a good plan, you can put your hope and your future in God's hands and watch what he does for you. But that takes aggressive faith. That's not just hope. It's not just this positive expectation. Like, I hope so, maybe that'd be nice if, like, no, it's aggressive faith. Like, you are committed. Okay. Like, and what's at stake here? I mean, if you don't believe, you live usually a miserable life, a depressed life, a discouraged life, an anxious life, an overwhelmed life, a dysfunctional life, right? At least if you're putting aggressive faith and believing God, even if he doesn't do it on your timing, he will still blow your mind. Okay, so the other verse that I was pulling up here is Isaiah 30:18, which says this. Yet the Lord longs to be gracious to you. Therefore, he will rise up to show you compassion. For the Lord is a God of justice. Blessed are all who wait for him, who seek him, who delight in him, who abide in him. Okay? And then also this one, David says this, Psalm 27:13. What would have become of me had I not believed I would see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living? Now, hopefully part of my spiritual story foreshadows that I think this. And I was given an opportunity to reflect on that when I made that post. Like seeing these old pictures, I'm like, oh my gosh, because sometimes when you get on a path with God, like you literally don't remember some of that old stuff because you literally are walking out this newness of life, right? So when you see these old pictures, you're like, wow, like that season, that woman, that time, like praise the Lord, right? Like what would have become of me if I kept searching like that? What would have become of me? Would I be in a soul tie? Would I be depressed? Would I even be here? Like what would have become of me had I not believed that I'd see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the earth, right? Right now, not in heaven now, right? On earth as it is in heaven now, right? Like what would have become of me had I not believed? So my encouragement, if you're hungry for a transformed life, is to evaluate what the source of your peace, of your fulfillment, of your contentment has been, your comfort has been, okay? Because some of the things that we use to comfort us are idols and they're addictions and they're crutches, right? And we're not designed to limp through life. We're designed to be free indeed, but we've got to dare to believe. And I was terrified to do it. So I'm sensitive to the fact that you might not be there yet. But I also want to highlight that it wasn't until I let go, I was willing to surrender and completely abandon everything else that I knew, everything familiar, everything. I was ready to part ways with who I thought I was. I was ready to part ways with knowledge that I had gained. I was ready to part ways with practices that I had experienced. I was ready to part ways with ideas of how I thought life should be or who I thought God was. Like I was ready to just lay that all down and be a child, right? And start learning this from the very beginning. Start crawling, start taking my first steps, right? And grow and just start over because I couldn't repeat cycles. I couldn't repeat patterns. I couldn't just survive when I know there's more for me and I know there's a good plan. I have hope of that. And I'm going to put my faith in something that's rock solid. Okay? And I'm going to keep a good attitude because I know there's going to be times where it's hard. Okay? And I'm not going to complain. And I'm going to trust that God is taking me somewhere. Okay? And I'm going to do the work. I'm going to go buy a Bible. I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to pray. I'm going to have quiet time. I'm going to remove the things from my life that aren't supposed to be in my life. I'm going to get my house in order so that I can be busy about his business because I can't fake joy, right? And I know that these other things did not satisfy. So I was looking for the one thing that does satisfy. And for me, that's God. That's a relationship with Jesus, okay? And allowing God's promises to be made manifest in my life. Co-laboring with God is the most creative experience of my entire life. And I never, just the freedom of knowing who you are and whose you are after years of not knowing it, not having to go through life with crutches, not having to constantly be afraid and future tripping or just visualizing this future without God in it, not being naive in a relationship and just letting anyone come into your life, like having spiritual discernment to test the spirits, to know what they're of before you even get down a path, before you even step foot on a path. You just know not to tread on it at all, right? Like, praise the Lord. Like that just doesn't, if you didn't come from a legacy of faith, you just don't get that knowledge, but God can give it to you. Whatever you're lacking, he can be a solution and an answer for, but you've got to stop seeking it elsewhere. That's my encouragement to you on today. I hope this blessed you. Just a reminder, like transformation is not something that we can do in our own strength. We can't suddenly get better, be more perfect. It's about excellence. It's about relationship with God. It's about letting him change you entirely from the inside out, transform you by the renewing of your mind, renewing a right spirit in you, creating in you a clean heart, letting you get in alignment in such a way that the words of your mouth and the meditation of your heart is good and pleasing in his sight, giving you words to pray, giving you a servant heart, teaching you, walking with you, like literally holding hands with you and walking through life with you. There's nothing like it. Nothing like it. And just being able to live with wisdom, with discernment, with peace, letting pleasantness and peace, he leads in ways of pleasantness and peace. How many people do you know lead you in that kind of way? Right? So he literally, what I can say is he gives you a divine rhythm. He rewires you, which is where God's vibes matter came from. I didn't know God. I used to believe vibes matter, right? But not all vibes matter. But God's do, right? God's thoughts matter. God's promises matter. God's character matters. God's purposes matter. God's plans matter. God's heart for you matters, right? But that is a rhythm. You can find the God rhythm. You can flow through life by this grace. Grace is a flow, okay? So it's not always this uphill climb. It's not always this fight and this battle. Yeah, you fight, but you've got different weapons when you come into relationship with God. You'll learn about the full armor of Christ. You'll learn about so many different things. So I hope this gives you some perspective about transformation. It's what I wish somebody would have come alongside and shared with me years ago. Spared me a lot of learning curves. But if you want to know more information, I have books like this, the God's Vibes Matter devotional. There's the God's Vibes Matter Reclaiming Your Spiritual Authority, God's Vibes Matter Co-Laboring with God. All those books are over on julianapage.com. There is a self-mastery course if you're really interested in doing this inner work. So powerful. It's just a guided course study. That's over on julianapage.com. There's also a ton of coaching packages and options for you as well. So make sure you go check that out. And if this message blessed you, or if there's somebody that's coming to mind that you know that it would bless, make sure you copy the link and share with a friend. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe as well. There we go.